Hello, my name is Garvin, and I read things and rattle on about them on the internet for your entertainment. Today, we're continuing our look at Lemuria in popular culture, and that has led us into science fiction. Now, last week we looked at the German science fiction series Perry Rhodan, and this week, before jumping into the Perry Rhodan Lemuria miniseries, we're going to look at the modern reboot, Perry Rhodan Neo. Let's turn to it, shall we? So as I mentioned last week, Perry Rhodan functions a lot more like a modern comic book series, having teams of writers that release on a weekly schedule as opposed to a single author who is writing a series of novels. This has benefits, as Perry Rhodan has run for more than 60 years without stopping. And if a writer on the team runs out of inspiration, or they burn out, or they just get sick and tired of talking about Perry Rhodan, they can just move on, and someone else can step into their place. So that means there are always new stories, and there's always another writer. There are downsides, though. As decades of accumulated history build up and the story expands ever outward, it does become more and more difficult for new readers to jump in and follow along with the story. In the comic book community, there are often arguments that the sheer weight of that history is an anchor around the characters and the story's neck. Now, DC Comics found a way around this by periodically resetting their universe. They would keep the core elements like Superman is always Clark Kent, Batman's parents are always dead due to crime. But they would update details and, in theory, clear room for new artistic vision. That's the plan anyways. I won't go into the actual execution. We don't have that kind of time though. So back in the year 2011, it was decided to create a second series, Perry Rhodan Neo. This series would be a modern reboot based in the early 21st century and would be completely separate from the old series, so there would be no crossovers, no references, and no real overlaps, according to the writers. It was released in Germany by the publishing company Pabel Moig Verlag in weekly pocketbooks of 160 pages each. Also, instead of 100 novel cycles like the main series is divided into, Neo would be divided into 8 to 12 book seasons to make things just a little easier on the readers. Again, according to the writers, the story would start in 2036, and while many of the same characters and starting events would be similar, there were no plans to make Perry Rhodan Neo tell exactly the same story as the original series. They were reserving the right to go in their own direction. This is a lot like the Marvel Ultimate line, where the modern reboot was released alongside the classical continuing universe. Hopefully Neo doesn't run into the same problems that the Ultimate lines did, but again, we're not going to go into that for reasons of time and space. Instead, let's fast forward to April 2021, when the English version was released in a light novel format by J-Novel Club, a company that specializes in translating light novels and manga to English and offers streaming for issues that haven't been released in a final ebook format. 18 issues have been released, but unfortunately, it looks like the English version has been discontinued. So while Perry Rhodan Neo is continuing in German and other languages, you're not likely to find anything after issue 18 in English. I wasn't able to find out why it was discontinued. It could be for reasons of popularity. Maybe Perry Rhodan just isn't as popular in the English-speaking world as it is in the German-speaking world. Or it could be some sort of editorial move. To be fair, that is what happened with the original series when translation efforts were stopped in the 60s and 70s. Or it could just be that Perry Rhodan is just cursed when it comes to English translations. If you're a fan, let me know what you think in the comments. So keeping all of that in mind, let's go ahead and push forward and talk about the first novel, with the title Vision Terrania. Now, changes have been made to the setting to update it. The Soviet Union is gone, replaced by a nation called the Great Russia. And Great Russia seems to be run by aristocrats because everyone who's important has a noble title. The People's Republic of China is of course still a great power, and so is the United States. However, more states around the world have become nuclear armed. Brazil is specifically mentioned as a nuclear power, for example. Resource scarcity is increasing and the price of everything is skyrocketing, making life harder for everybody. climate change is wreaking havoc, and tensions across the world are at a fever pitch. Everyone can feel the world rocking on a knife's edge. During all of this, space exploration has become at best an afterthought, or more often a barely funded joke. Despite this, humanity has managed to create several scientific moon bases for study and experimentation, and this is considered a semi-bright spot in how things are going. So when those moon bases go dark, with no explanation, everyone starts panicking. It's here that Perry Rhodan and his crew of Reginald Bull, Clark G. Flipper, and the ship's doctor Eric Manoli are sent up in the Stardust, a prototype ship that is the top of the line, perched on a dubious rocket engine that wouldn't be cleared for use if we had any alternatives, which just seems to sum up the United States space program perfectly. On an interesting note, there doesn't seem to be any private space industry with their own launch vehicles in the Perry Rhodan universe, and that's kind of interesting. So Perry couldn't just rent out a rocket and slap the Stardust on top of it. He's got to use this clutched together, hope it doesn't explode job, and I guess that's all his options are. The crew's job, however, is simple. Get to the moon, find out what happened to the bases, and render aid if possible. And by certain definitions, they succeed. Well, they get to the moon at least. However, it's a harrowing journey because the Stardust is forced to crash land and all of their communications with Earth are cut off by jamming. The crew did bring a ground transport vehicle, so Perry and Reginald are able to journey to the source of the jamming, and they find a giant alien spaceship just like in the original story. And there, they meet Crest and Thora. Now, in this version, there's no yammering about a mysterious mental and physical decline of their species. Instead, the story leans into the screen addiction element for most of the crew, and I feel like that's more workable and pertinent to me. Crest is, however, still dying of leukemia. They don't change that. But what's interesting is they make a change that Perry recognizes it because he watched his grandfather die of the same disease, and he can recognize the symptoms in Crest. And that really created a more human element to Perry for me, and I like that. Now, in this version, Thora is way more antagonistic and less eager to help. She puts some hard limits real fast on how far she's willing to go. And that also increases the realism feeling for me. As in the original novel, Thora would bluster and kind of spit a bit, and then just kind of do whatever Perry wanted her to do. And she felt kind of like a pushover. Here, she feels like someone with very different goals and desires than Perry. There's also more conflict in the crew itself. Clark is upset because his girlfriend went missing while climbing a mountain, and he's worried that she may very well be dead. Reginald is enough of a hothead that he just isn't very understanding of Clark's preoccupation and his constant push to get out of there to go find his girlfriend. Reginald wants him to get his head in the game. So Perry is having to keep these two from throwing down. Even with a more hostile Thora in the mix, a deal is still able to be hashed out. But Perry also knows, just like in the original story, he can't just bring the tech back to a single nation. That's going to kickstart World War III and worse. So, he lands the ship in the Gobi Desert, hijacks Earth's communication network, and tells everyone exactly what is happening, and invites anyone who wants to join him in the Gobi to come build the city of the future, Terrania. Now, there's also two supporting storylines that are running alongside this. First, we have John Marshall, an investment banker who turned his back on making money to create and run a shelter for street children in the decaying city of Houston, which already tells you this is a fantasy, and the realization that some of his kids are not what we would call baseline humans, but, well, let me just put it this way. Some of these could be trying out for the X-Men. Let's just say that and leave it there. Our second storyline follows Alan D. Merchant, a spy master with the incredibly and disturbingly powerful Department of Homeland Security. Like, seriously, in the novel, they're shown censoring websites and arresting and holding people without warrants or trials, which I'll admit kind of hits close to home right now. This is something I'm incredibly opposed to under any circumstances. I'm a firm believer that everyone in the United States deserves due process, and we should not open that door. Sorry, I'll get off the soapbox, getting back to the novel. Alan decides he needs to put what's good for humanity over what's good for the American government, and this of course gets him into trouble and forces him to go on the run. This really expands the character because while Alan Merchant was present in Stardust Enterprise, the first novel of the old series, he was very much kind of a background character. And just a note for any Perry Rhodan fans, I've only read Stardust Enterprise and Perry Rhodan Neo 1, so kind of keep that in mind. So, based on my experience, the Neo character is way more developed, way more human, and honestly more interesting. So I kind of like what they did here. In fact, I'm just going to come out and say I found Perry Rhodan Neo to be a great improvement over what I read on the original series. There was more in-depth characterization and deeper world building because the series, in the very first book, took the time to show me how bad things were getting on Earth. For example, the John Marshall storyline, which is set in Houston, the city feels like it's dying to me in that story. All the wealthy citizens are withdrawing into these fortified, gated communities, and the slums and decaying parts of the city seem to be expanding, and the only thing keeping things from exploding is ever more militant police departments. And John Marshall feels like the only guy who is trying to help anybody. And even then, the shelter he runs has to have the kids who live there doing things like repairing shopping carts and bikes and selling souvenirs to poverty tourists to break even. This paints a really grim picture because if what should be a thriving city in a great power like the United States is like this, what is it like in places like Africa or Central America or, even places like Eastern Europe, which are considered solidly middle-class countries at this point? So the world building is really in-depth and sells you that the world is at a terrible crisis point. And this is why Perry Rhodan is willing to take this great leap to just shatter this logjam and hopefully create something better, because even as an astronaut, he can sit there and see all of this and realize that there is no way that keeping the status quo is going to work. I'm also going to turn here to the aliens because there's a lot of details that were put in here. Like, these aliens don't cry because of sadness. They weep whenever they experience any sort of overpowering emotion. So when they're incredibly angry or incredibly happy, or just anytime they're feeling a strong surge of emotion, water is coming out of their eyes, which is an interesting thing. They also have a slightly different skeletal structure, but that's not lingered on as much. So honestly, Perry Rhodan Neo works better for me than Stardust Enterprise did, and I'm saddened to find that the English series is only limited to 18 volumes. Now, you can get all 18 of those on Amazon, and who knows, maybe they'll restart translations someday, especially if we all stop by and pick up a couple novels. So, here's hoping, right? On that note, I think this is a good place to end this week's video. I hope you found this video informative, or at least entertaining. If you did, please leave a like, a comment, or consider subscribing. All of these help me in my eternal struggle against the dread Lord Algorithm. Terror be on his name. If you'd like a voice on future videos, consider joining my Everwise patrons for $1 a month. There's a link in the description below. Joining up gets you a vote on future subjects and other things. Speaking of patrons, I'd like to give a special thanks to Big Steve. I really hope that you're finding this interesting, and as always, man, your support means a lot. Next week, we're going to look at the Perry Rhodan miniseries Lemuria, which is part of the classical universe, and is actually the whole reason I started digging into Perry Rhodan in the first place. So, I hope you'll join me, but until then, take care of yourself, take care of each other, and of course, keep reading.